push pineapple, shake the tree. I could do, push pineapple, grind coffee.
The Ayatollah Khomeini.
Stockache in water.
Brixton riots.
Chernobyl, yeah. Yo-yos.
Shoulder poses. Yuppies. Fast living. Fast food. Ecstasy.
Breakdancing. Cycling shorts.
Salman Rushdie. Salmonella. Edwina Curry. Princess Diana.
Prince Charles being loopy.
Fergie. Hong Kong. Tiananmen Square.
James
Anderton. The Monastery. The M25. Heysel Stadium.
Poll tax. Cover versions of 50s songs.
Jive Bunnies. Kayla Minogue. Neighbours. Prisoner cell blockage.
Tracksuits, condoms, Ronald Reagan, Filofaxes, Rambo, Lager Louts, red braces. Hello, I'm Muriel Gray, and may I make the tentative suggestion that the 1980s have been slightly less than wonderful? You've just heard some of the reasons from a group of young people who've grown up in this decade. If they're disillusioned with it, how do you think the 30-somethings feel? Oliver James, as well as being a psychologist, also produces television programmes.
The overall picture of the state of youth today is extremely depressing. There's no doubt many boring old farts like me at age 35 are saying this sort of thing, but it is true that if you're a teenager, you're not delivering, are you? Where's the music? I want to hear it. Where are the clothes? Where's the style? It's pathetic.
Over on the bad side of town, in thousands of steaming basements, London's working-class youth tribes, punks and skinheads, rastas and soul boys, gather to get down and dance to their favourite music. They don't need this pressure on. They don't need this pressure on. Hey, young guns, go for it. Whoop, whoop. Yeah.
Guns, having some fun. Crazy ladies, keep them on the run. Wise guys realize there's danger in emotional ties. See, single and free, no fears, no tears. What I want to be. 1, 2, take a look at you. Death by matrimony.
You talk to young musicians who are sort of just starting out, or you talk to George Michael for that matter, as I have, and you find that both of them are starting from the premise of what will people buy? What do people want to hear? They're not starting from the premise, I have something deep within me that I want to express. I don't give a damn what anybody thinks about it. I'm going to find the best possible way for me to express it. And the same, of course, goes for fashion.
Hey,
if you're starting from the premise of what do people want to hear or see, you're not going to produce art. You're going to produce commerce. And that's what's happened in the 80s.
Well, it would be the easiest thing in the world to put together the worst records of the last 10 years and say that proves 80s music has been rubbish. But let's give the 80s a chance. Let's take just one city, Glasgow for instance. It's probably the most successful city in Britain when it comes to producing pop music. Glasgow has given us some of the biggest bands of the 80s, like Simple Minds or Wet Wet Wet, and some of the best, like the Blue Nile and Hue and Cry. But the place is awash with groups. In fact, it's said that currently there are something like 50 Glasgow bands with record contracts. Now, what about an impartial opinion? Let's take David Belcher, rock correspondent for the Glasgow Herald, who spent most of the last 10 years writing about all these bands. And let's ask him a straightforward question. Well, are they any good?
Oh yeah, well yeah, there might well be 50 bands with record contracts, but how good are 48 of them, or 49 and a half of them? Ever since A&R men from London record companies discovered that Glasgow's pubs and bars were reasonably civilised and open all hours, they've been encamped in Glasgow, and this has led to what can only be described as a kind of bland A&R man rock. You get lots and lots of Glasgow musos forming bands to attract the attention of A&R men, which produces, as you can imagine, the most awful rock it could be possible to find. It's not music made by fans of music, it's kind of career music. Role models for Glasgow bands at the moment would be a cross between George Michael, Robert Palmer, and I can't think of anyone else who's as vacuous as those two. We should talk to the musicians and see what they think.
Let's pick a Glasgow band that's been around for a few years, now on the verge of success. Surely they've got to be enthusiastic about 80s music. Danny O'Neill and Sam Corrie of the River Detectives.
I mean, you must admit, there isn't really a lot of memorable bands in the 80s. You know, a band that you could say this was an 80s act. I mean, who? Ultravox? I mean, you know.
I think one of the things that characterised the 80s was really the disappearance of the songwriter to a good extent. At the start of the 80s, after the punk thing, you had a lot of new romantic bands, for instance, and it was all very glamorous but very synthesised. And a lot of times the bands as a unit would write as opposed to someone sitting down writing individual as a songwriter. That was a trend that seemed to have continued for a long time.
Hopefully bands like us can make music in the 90s just that wee bit more inspirational than Steve Strange, you know? Because he started the 80s, didn't he? Steve Strange. Remember him? People like Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue. I mean, really, these people are third-rate Australian soap opera actors, you know? And
they've got #1 albums in the British charts.
That's right. I mean, something went wrong somewhere in the connection there, you know.
Every loser wins once the dream begins.
Remember Wixie from EastEnders getting to #1 with Every Loser Wins? Or are you still trying to forget? Well, how true that is of the 1980s. But we wanted an unbiased opinion, so we went to Dave Hill. He's a writer for The Independent, and he's also published a book about Prince, who, tight trousers and diminutive stature apart, is very probably a genius. So what else has been remarkable?
If I had to choose one particular group or phenomenon as the definitive 1980s pop happening, I think it would probably have to be Frankie Goes to Hollywood. In all their sort of hideous glory and all the splendidly manufactured hyperbole that surrounded them, the two glorious hit singles that they had and the mountain of dreck which followed swiftly on their heels. Just for that, they kind of sum up the decade quite nicely.
Of course, people can turn around immediately and say how pretentious pop musicians talking about the possibility of nuclear war and the effects of it. But I mean, I get the impression that Frankie Goes to Hollywood are a bunch of thinkers with a capital T.
Well, you see, I don't... see, it's not necessarily about nuclear war, although that is one of the things it does cover. It's just any particular two tribes, whether it be you and me, or parents and children, or, you know, it's just kind of... If everyone just eased back a bit, you know, it'd be a much nicer place to live in, I suppose. That's all.
We were really terrible. We didn't give a damn really about the nuclear thing. We were just interested in having fun and selling records. We were thinking about things like, I put the 4-minute warning at the start of the Frankie 12-inch, and I thought, how amazing. If I put this 4-minute warning at the start of this 12-inch, then when people hear the 4-minute warning, if it were to happen, then they would think, it's the Frankie's record coming on.
Well, a bit of honesty there from Holly Einstein Johnson and Frankie producer Trevor Horn, the man to thank when they finally drop the bomb and we all go out whistling as we smoulder. And it's also about time the pop industry owned up to the fact that these days the producer makes the records and the performer's role in life is to keep a tidy makeup bag. Veteran Top of the Pops producer Michael Hurrell.
When the A&R man goes out now to look at a group, he's listening to them, but he's watching them. Because there is absolutely no good now in a record company signing up what might be an extremely talented group or soloist who doesn't look too good and isn't going to be too good on the video.
The fact that the pop video has become regarded as part of the artistic apparatus of pop in the 1980s and that it's so much like a commercial goes to show that the main influences on pop have been commercial influences and not underground influences. More and more actual commercials are relying upon pop songs, youth cultural images, this great process of sort of designer nostalgia